had to drink as soon as I woke up, and I hated myself for it. But I'd find ways of rationalising it. Like I felt like something horrible was going to happen to me unless I did. But as soon as I put these masks down, you kind of realise who you are, and you can build on that. But you can't build a mask on a mask on a mask.
Hey, it's Jake here from the High Performance Podcast. I want to start by saying big thanks to all of our new subscribers. This channel is growing like crazy, but most people that watch these videos on YouTube don't subscribe, and it's so important to us. If you can just hit the subscribe button, it grows our channel. The bigger the channel grows, the greater the names we can attract. The greater the names, the more important the conversations, and the more impact we can have on your life. So please, before you watch this video, just hit subscribe right now. It's a game changer for us. It's also fantastic for you. But right now, enjoy the video. Thanks for watching. Well, thanks very much.
Thanks a lot. It's good to be here.
Welcome to High Performance.
It's nice, isn't it?
Thanks.
It's nice.
How would you define high performance?
I listened to this podcast, so I was like, right, I've got to prepare a proper answer for this. But I think someone said it before, which I thought was a really good way of doing it, which was when my thoughts, my words, and my actions are aligned, but with me, there's a caveat of, and it makes me happy.
Yeah.
Because sometimes my thoughts and my words and my actions can mean something else. And it doesn't always lead me to be content. But I think when they're all kind of going the right way for the right reason, that's when I feel good.
Take us to a moment then in your life where you felt you're in the flow of high performance. Because Matthew McConaughey came on this podcast and was brilliant. He said, we spend our lives looking at the bad stuff and the dark times and the tricky moments, thinking that will lead us to high performance. But he speaks about green lights. He's like, look at the days when you are in flow, and then find more of those days. That's
so interesting. I love this book. I love the audio, but I mean, I could listen to his voice forever. I actually did I did a play once, and I had to be Southern American in it, so I listened to him every day on the way to work. It was brilliant. But I think for me, like being on stage at Busted is when I feel like I don't really have to think about anything else. Like I normally rehearse really quite obsessively for quite a while, so then I don't have to think about what I'm playing or singing, and then it just becomes about kind of enjoying that moment and kind of breathing it in. And I think that's when I kind of get into a bit of a kind of flow state, and I don't really understand the difference between the work and the enjoyment.
So that's interesting then. So you're in high performance when you've already done the work, so you can enjoy the fruits of your labour. So how do you know when enough work is enough?
I don't know. I struggle with that. I kind of I do. I mean, I'm not a very talented musician. I've never really kind of been very good. So I kind of after kind of years of hating myself about it, I kind of realised that I just need to work my arse off at it. So I kind of so now, like, we start rehearsal. We got a tour in September, so we start rehearsal in August. So I'll start in June and start kind of getting all my ducks in a row. I'll go and visit the drummer and we'll play through everything. So then when I go in the room, I'm already kind of prepared.
So when you define high performance as being on stage with the band then, I'm interested in what came first for you. Was it the buzz of performing that got you to do the hard work, or was it the love of the hard work and the performance was just a nice consequence?
I don't know. I never really thought I'd be in a band. I kind of never really thought I'd do anything like this. Really, I kind of, for me, it was a way to get somewhere else. And I would have done anything. Like I would have been a hairdresser, and anything possible to kind of take me out of where I was my agenda. So I think and I just so happened, like I went to theatre school and then I was like, right, okay, I'm going to be an actor. That's going to take me away, and then I met James whilst I was at theatre school. He was on the same acting agency as me. So we'd meet at auditions, and I met him and I was like, you've got it. I'm going to hold on to you, and he had something about him. He was the weirdest kid I've ever met in my life, but he had this kind of something that I didn't, and I knew that I needed it. So I just, I grabbed hold of talent.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. But you talk about you needed to get away from what?
Well, from where I grew up, I wasn't very, very happy at home. And I kind of always felt like as soon as I was old enough, I was going to move out and move away. Like I moved out when I was 16, and it was kind of, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me, really. You know, I mean, subsequently I joined a band with James. We started Busted together, so I went to live with his parents in Southend, and it was just about, I was always in trouble at home. I was in trouble where I lived, you know, like, and all my mates were doing the same shit that I was. It was just like very apparent that if I didn't get out, I was going to be the same. And and also I couldn't stand where I lived, you know, so I kind of wanted to be as far away from that as possible. So,
and what sort of trouble do you mean?
Well, like we were, you know, typical kind of, you know, naughty kids and kind of getting into trouble and stuff. And I was taking loads of drugs and kind of drinking relentlessly, you know, from a really young age.
How old?
Probably from about 12 or 13, we were kind of getting, what I personally was getting as fucked up as I could. I didn't realise that my mates weren't doing as much as I was until I was much older. I look back at them going, oh, I was the only one who was kind of blackout and everyone else was just having a good time. But I was the one going, how can I get as fucked up as I possibly can on as little money as I possibly can?
Because one of the phrases that really resonates with Jake and I on this is we talk about the ghosts of our childhood that often rattle around our adult bodies, that until we've had chance to resolve some of these things, they will continue showing up even as adults. So what, like when I hear you talk about blackouts, and in the documentary I've seen that really moving clip where you and your brother sit on a park bench and you almost apologise to each other. What, just for our listeners, what was it that you were seeking to escape?
Well, I was kind of we had quite a traumatic upbringing in our house. Like we didn't really get along with my stepdad, and it became quite kind of frictious at times. And my brother was much more. Well, he was a couple of years older than me, so he kind of had the ability to stand up a bit more. Whereas I kind of just hid, you know. And I kind of never really got a chance to kind of talk to him about that until that moment. And it was a really big thing for us to kind of sit down and talk about that, because we're very typical men in some way with that kind of, we just kind of like brush past it and move forward, and we've never really addressed anything like that, you know. So for us to kind of, I kind of always felt guilty because he left home when he was 13. He got made to leave, and I stayed, and he always felt guilty for leaving me, and I always felt guilty for not going with him. So it was a really big moment for us, I think.
So how many years younger are you than him?
2 years younger.
So you're really from a really early age, you're basically walking around with a sackload of guilt. I mean, you're guilty about hiding rather than coming out and standing alongside your brother and helping him. But you were a little kid. You feel guilty about staying there when he's been forced to leave the family home. Why didn't I go with him? That is a very powerful emotion to have to carry. Did you just push it away for all those years when you were in the band and everything was going well, and we were all seeing you, you know, playing to arenas and releasing records and getting number ones? Where was that guilt then?
I never really realised that it was guilt. You know, I kind of I always felt shame. You know, like which I knew really well, and that kind of allowed me to act in a way that I could make sense of, because I felt shame. So there's shame, maybe take drugs and drink more, you know, and then I'd just feel shame about what I was doing. So then I'd drink more and take more drugs, you know, so it's kind of this perpetual kind of cycle of shame. But I think guilt never really played into it for me at the time until I was much older. And then like my kids are at a certain age now where I kind of think of what I was doing when I was that age, and they're kind of at that age now, and I'm like, I couldn't imagine them having to kind of go through that or deal with it. So it's kind of but I never really thought about guilt really for a long time. But I don't feel that much guilt right now.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't, because guilt implies in some way you're responsible. I mean, let's be totally clear. You're a 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old kid. There's no responsibility on your shoulders. It's about understanding that, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. But I think that's what comes with age and kind of dealing with stuff, is you kind of get to kind of look back, and you know, I had a therapist once who kind of would do loads of stuff about your inner child and kind of go there and kind of look at that stuff and kind of with an empathetic eye, like you're a father looking at that kid, you know. And that was a big thing for me, because, you know, like we never really went too deep on it, but whenever I what I took away from those sessions was I was able to kind of look up, when I feel these things, I can kind of trace it back and go, right, that's that kid who's scared or upset or feeling, you know, frightened, and that's not necessarily who I am now. And I'm not scared or frightened right now. So I'm able to change that narrative a bit.
And have you got any happy childhood memories?
Well, I can't really remember much. You know, that was the thing that came up in shooting this doc, was that, you know, I realized very quickly on, because I wanted to make a documentary about addiction. I kind of went into like a production company and kind of gave them this big pitch about, like, I'm obsessed with addiction and like finding out more science and kind of all these kind of breakthroughs that are happening, like everything from brain scans to psychedelics blow my mind about what's coming out now, and the kind of trajectory of that world. And so I wanted to go and find out about those things and kind of trace where addiction is, what it comes down to, because you hear about it's genetic, but then Dr. Gabor Mate says it's not, you know, it's all trauma. And you hear about trauma and you're like, well, that doesn't make sense for everybody that I meet, because everyone, you know, and then, you know, all these kind of things. So I wanted to kind of find out a bit more about that. And then we kind of, we started shooting the doc, and it just became really kind of apparent that it was much more of a personal story for me rather than what they would say boring science. But I find the boring science really, really interesting. So it's really hard.
I'm interested in that before we go on and explore that, because having seen the documentary, there's some really fascinating questions in relation to high performance. But I'm particularly interested in that phrase of feeling shame. Yeah. Because I think that's one of the most pernicious emotions you can have. To be ashamed of something is something that's really quite deep and almost embarrassing and can feel toxic. Yeah.
When you say pernicious, that means to like permeate, like
it's in everything,
right?
And I'm interested in, what was it that you felt shame about?
I mean, I don't really know. See, back to, but sorry, I realised I didn't really answer your question. Like, I couldn't really remember anything. Like when I think back to my childhood and kind of happy memories and stuff, I can't really, like, everything's just a bit vague. And like, I think, and I was like, do I have these stories, or have I made them up, or have they evolved over time into something that they're not? All these kind of questions, because I don't really think I can physically remember these moments. And like when I've sat down with my brother lots and talked about the past now, and he mentioned kind of moments to me, which were big fucking moments, you know, like really big, important pinnacle moments in a child's development. And I don't remember anything about it, like nothing. Like I'm like, that did not happen. Like it did. I was there, you know, and I don't remember it. So like in some way, your kind of brain has some way of kind of blacking it out, and kind of like, maybe it's that I've always kind of felt like it's like this kind of scaffolding that we build up around ourselves to kind of make who we are now. Like this kind of, you kind of build this kind of character on top of each other that becomes who you are, you know. So for me to do that, I kind of felt like I'd blacked out all this kind of hard shit and not dealt with it. But because of that, I felt some kind of weird shame and kind of darkness about it that I couldn't really come to terms with.
And was it there all the time, or when you moved in with James and you started writing songs and things began to happen, like, was there lightness in those moments?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. You know, like, I mean, I absolutely loved it. Like, I couldn't believe it was happening. Yeah. You know, like, it was just like, I mean, we started the band, and all we dreamt of is playing this venue in Southend called Chinnery's, and it was like new kind of cool up and coming bands would play there, and it was like 200 capacity. We were like, maybe we can play there and fucking score chicks or something. That was kind of like the big goal, you know. So when we were like shooting videos and there was like camera crews and all this kind of stuff around, I couldn't quite believe it was happening, you know. So there was loads of massive, amazing moments, but I still found my way to kind of black out and kind of, even though I should have been enjoying all the fruits of what was happening, I couldn't help but feel like I didn't belong or didn't deserve it. And
is there an argument that almost makes it worse, because then there's another voice in your head going, you should be loving every minute of this, because you're now in a band, you've now got your dream, you've had a #1 single, you're touring, you're famous, you're everything you ever wanted and dreamed of, and then a lot more. Yet still these thoughts are there, still the shame is there, which probably adds to the...
Absolutely breeds more shame. You know, like, and And also I was acting in ways which weren't necessarily conclusive to the pop image, you know. So I was kind of we were kind of like, I mean, Busted was kind of it was in a weird place because it wasn't really a rock band, so we weren't like cool enough to be accepted by that world, but we weren't really a stereotypical pop band, so we weren't really accepted in that world. So it was kind of this weird kind of like skater kids who couldn't skate in their own lane, you know, and it kind of didn't really make sense. So kind of like we always felt a bit like the outsiders. But then, I mean, when it got really big and successful, it kind of came up as a massive surprise to me. Like I didn't really see it coming, and then I was like, wow, we're fucking playing Wembley and stuff, you know. It didn't really ever, I didn't see the rise, I didn't see anything. It was just suddenly dawned on me that we're kind of doing this cool shit.
But could you connect the hard work you'd done of learning an instrument, of writing these songs, could you connect that with the success, or did that feel like, extraneous to you?
I think that's the thing. Like we wrote these songs in Jay's bedroom, and we wrote silly songs which made us laugh, and that's all we kind of did. Like I never really thought that they would be taken seriously or made into an album or anything. So we were kind of like, I was really shocked that these were doing well, you know, in a way, because we also when I met James, he played piano like with one finger here and three fingers here, you know, and I played like 4 chords on the guitar, and that was it. And that's how we wrote the whole first album, really.
It's like you were never meant to be a band, right?
Never meant to happen.
No.
You know, like it was such a kind of like organic kind of punk rock way to start, really. We really couldn't do much. We were just writing kind of like from our life, and it seemed to resonate with people. And then I think what really ate me up was the fact that I was never a bass player. I could play guitar basically to write songs. Like James was a much better guitar player than me, and we write these little songs on guitar. Like I could play like most of the chords, you know, in like a scrappy little way. And then we got signed, and they were like, right, well, Charlie and James are much better at guitar than you, so you'll play bass. And I was like, I don't have any desire to play this instrument, nor do I want to. And it was kind of pushed on me. And it took me fucking ages to learn it, like really, really long time. And I felt really inadequate with it. And then when I had to sing with it, it became a different minefield, because like to play, I could learn to play it all. But then when I had to sing, like playing bass and singing is really hard because they're like alternate rhythms. So you're singing something different to what you're playing. And I found that really hard. So I was kind of constantly kind of feeling less than for that, and kind of feeling like a bit of a fraud. You know.
The thing is, right, I look at this though, and I think that all of this is actually, in a weird way, the epitome of high performance. Because if you think of what you did, you ended up in a band that did the amazing things that Busted did, but you ended up in that band despite childhood traumas. You ended up in that band despite the fact that you felt like you were in a band that didn't fit anywhere in the sort of spectrum of music. You were in that band unsuccessful despite the fact that as the band grew and become more successful, that only increased your shame because you struggled even more with those things from your childhood. And then you get forced to play an instrument that you don't even want to play in the band that you don't know where fits, that you're only in, and you still got these childhood traumas. It's like everywhere you look, there's challenge.
Yeah.
Yet you're in it, and you're doing it, and you're learning it, and you're singing, and you're performing, and you're signing autographs, and your fame is growing. Like, that's high performance. High performance isn't just gliding through life in a straightforward way.
Yeah.
And thinking, well, that life was easy for me, I must be a high performer. I want people to understand that this is high performance. The ability to deal with all that shit and do it still.
Yeah, I think that's it. You're so right. Like I couldn't look at it in that way at the time. I was just kind of going through it and kind of panicking. But I think that's, you know, like that's life, isn't it? You kind of learn in the struggle. You know, and I think we all kind of live in that struggle, you know, a lot of the time. But what comes out of it is an ability to make other things less painful. Do you know what I mean? I think of it the same way as why I get in this bloody ice tub every morning. You know, I hear about all this kind of stuff that it makes your inflammation and good for your heart and stuff like that. I don't do it for that reason. I do it because I hate doing it, and I get in it every morning, and I never want to get in it. But when I get in there for 3 to 5 minutes, I get out, and nothing in my day is going to be as difficult as getting in that freezing cold tub every morning. So that's why I'm one of those annoying wankers who talks about cold tubs all the time. But it's been really big for me, you know, because I get in it and I'm like, right, cool. Anything else is kind of easy, you know. But I think you're right. Like it's about you know, learning to kind of deal in the mess. you know, and kind of come through it.
But have you got to a point yet where you can look at it and go, look how strong I was?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I have got to that point. Like, especially now, like Busted is in the best place it's ever been, you know, and it kind of feels like we really kind of know what we are and what we do. And I think that's taken a long time for me personally to get to. But I feel like now there's nothing that I don't feel like we could do in a way, you know, like as a band. Like I feel like we could kind of, like when we write together, when we record, everything's kind of like, I mean, it's hard when you've got three creatives, because that's the biggest problem with us, is that we've got three different creative brains who all have different ideas and want to push different things, which is hard. But then that becomes, through compromise, becomes easier. But then, you know, it's I do feel like I've learned a lot from that.
Can I go back to that period though, when you're learning bass and you're having to learn about performing? Were you still getting pissed? Were you still taking drugs in that period?
Yeah, the whole time. Yeah, I mean, it was a daily thing for me from a young age, you know, like I think it never became, I never thought of it as a daily thing. Like I didn't, I always thought like you have a problem when you wake up and drink, you know. Eventually that became my life, but it wasn't for the whole time during Busted. I'd wait till 4 or 5 o'clock and start getting wrecked, you know, but like, and after shows and things like that, it would just be that. But then, but I always had these things that I would never do. Like, I won't do that because that's bad. Then I'd cross that wall. I'd jump over that wall and be like, oh, right, now I'm doing that. Okay, well, I won't do that. And then I get to there and I do that. And, you know.
Like what?
Well, like drinking, because like drinking in the morning was a big thing for me to kind of, I don't think you can really ignore that. You know, when you wake up and you've got the physical kind of, when you become physically addicted to something, it's very different to when you're non-physically addicted. You know, when you like literally, if I didn't drink first thing in the morning for a few years, like I would physically shake and have seizures and all this kind of horrible stuff.
So what age are you when this is happening?
This is about 21 to 24, maybe, no, 22 to 25. Right. You know, like those kind of years. I was kind of, I had to drink as soon as I woke up, you know, like, and it would be, and I hated myself for it, but I'd find ways of rationalizing it, you know, like I felt like something horrible was going to happen to me unless I did, you know, and then I would hide things around so I could always do it. Like I had this kind of routine of waking up in the morning and I had a load of stuff stashed in my airing cupboard in my bathroom, and I'd kind of flush a chain, open a can, drink that, and then I'd feel a bit of ease and comfort and kind of carry on with my day.
And then, so that was the first boundary. What was, he said you were, well,
there was a lot more before that. There was a lot more before that, kind of like there's loads of things. Like I never thought I would have to lie about my drug taking. You know, I did to management and stuff because management didn't want you taking drugs. But then, you know, like the record company and stuff like that, like I'd lie about that all the time. But I thought it was just rock and roll, you know. But then, like I had moments where I was always lying about how much I'd done, how much I'd drunk, how much I'd, you know, especially with my wife. Like it became like we were dating, and towards our marriage, like I was just, I lied to her every day about what I was up to, what I was doing. And I loved her, you know, and I kind of never thought that I would be that person, but I was kind of constantly hiding and lying. You know, that was a big thing for me.
And why was, you know, at the age of like, I mean, would you say it got really bad at what, like 22, 21, 22?
Yeah, 21, I think. When Busted ended, it was a big thing for me because before, I think work kept me, I had to perform, you know, I had to do something every day, you know, and so I could kind of level things out. I was a very functioning addict in a way. And I don't know if I'm very keen on that word, but like it was, I was functioning, like I could get shit done and I could still carry on with what I was doing, and it allowed me to function in the way that I needed to function, you know. But then when Busted ended, when I was 21, I suddenly was faced with the prospect of what do I do with the rest of my life. And at that time, I had a shitload of cash and loads of time, and it just went fucking
dangerous
out of
mix for you.
For me, it was a dangerous mix, and also kind of no direction, no purpose, no kind of nothing to really, like, everything was about the band and everything was about this train that we were on that we couldn't get off, and suddenly I was off that train and I didn't know what to do next.
And who was the first person that said, Matt, this is like way beyond just enjoying life?
I had so many people sit me down, like really kind of key figures in my life.
Because that's my big thing when I watch a documentary. I was like, where were the people helping this guy out?
Yeah.
But they were there, were they? There
was some people there, you know, like there was a few people at my record company who were kind of much older than me and would kind of sat me down and were like, this isn't normal behavior. You need to sort your shit out. Like quite a few people. And my manager was always telling me that, you know, but at the same time it's very hard because they couldn't ship me off to rehab because I had work to do, you know, so it's like trying to manage kind of like we've got, and at the time you're earning so many people so much money that you've just got to keep the fucking show on the road in a way. So it's like, how do we manage this wrecking ball and kind of keep him kind of like going, you know? But I did have definite people sit me down and talk to me. And
wasn't there fear, like, I'm going to blow this, I'm going to ruin this, I'm like...
Yeah, that was always kind of there, but I think it was kind of, part of me was all right with that, you know, in a weird way. You know, like, I mean, towards the end of Busted, like I was kind of preempting the downfall of me in a way. You know, I was kind of almost begging for it, you know, because I feel like I'd kind of had enough of living like this for such a long time. And then it took me years then to kind of come to grips with it. But then it was, I was always kind of waiting for that moment of it's over, you know.
And when was that moment?
It came when my daughter was born. Like she was about 8 months old, and I think a few things had happened before that. Like I got signed to as a solo artist when Busted ended. They gave me this amazing opportunity at the record company. Gave me a great record deal for a solo record, and I never really wanted to be a solo artist, but I was like, great, something to do, brilliant, you know. And I really fucked that up. Like that was the biggest kind of failure I'd ever really experienced then.
Explain what happened.
Well, I kind of I was given an amazing budget and kind of could work with anybody I wanted to, you know, studios that were incredible recording studios and people and their time and their effort. And I was just not turning up. I wasn't there, you know, and I'd leave people waiting. I'd kind of, you know, the album took 3 times as long to record as we said, because I wasn't writing it, you know. And then, and at the time I was working with this amazing guy called Jason Perry, who was so worried about me. You know, it was kind of like he had a really hard thing because he had to get an album made from me, but all he wanted to do was take me away, you know. And it was so it was a really hard relationship for him to have to deal with. But then I think, and then that bombed, you know, that record kind of came out. Not surprisingly, it wasn't very good. It wasn't very right. You know, it didn't really make any sense. None of it kind of came together as an album. It was all over the place. And like everything Busted did went to number 1, like everything, you know. And so my first single went at number 11. And for a new kind of artist, that would have been great. But because everything from Busted had gone to number 1, it was a massive kind of failure.
And for a guy that's living with shame, how did that make you feel?
I mean, it made me feel embarrassed and kind of, and I think so there was 2 things going on. One is that I knew that I hadn't done the right job. I hadn't done a good enough job. And but part of me was quite relieved that I hadn't tried as hard as I could because it had failed and I could kind of rely on that. Well, I was fucked up. It wasn't a big deal, you know, but actually it killed me that didn't work because I think at that point I didn't have anything else going on. And that was the only thing that I had to strive towards, you know. So it was, when that didn't work out, it was a big kind of dawning moment on me that, you know, you have very little to do right now.
And just because obviously we're not in this world, right?
Yeah.
When this happens, how do people deal with it from the record label's perspective or the PR companies? Like, do they sugarcoat this and go, you know, the economic conditions aren't quite right for solo artists at the moment, and or do they just go, we gave you a chance and you blew it, mate?
Well, I think people stop picking up the phone, you know, and people stop checking on me and stop kind of like...
And that sends a message.
It sends a message, you know, like suddenly when your diary isn't full, you know, and you've got nothing happening and no one's really caring about, and the offer for a second album was not there, you know, and I was like, what happens now? Kind of that kind of thing. It was a very was an obvious sign. I'd heard of this happening to loads of bands that my mates were in, so I kind of knew what was happening.
And the answer was more drink and more drugs, wasn't it?
The answer was, yeah, just hide away and drink and use.
Blimey. So had you been in rehab at this point?
I've been twice at that point, yeah.
And who, in those periods, so this is, did you go into rehab while you were in Busted or only after?
No, only after.
Right. So who sent you?
Whilst I was making the first record, I knew I was in real trouble with everybody, and I kind of hadn't been turning up to sessions, I hadn't been doing stuff, and they were spending a lot of money on me. And so I kind of went, I need to do something dramatic to kind of get people on side again. So I went to rehab, and I went to this really posh place, and I kind of just went, right, I'm going, that's it. And I kind of went within a few days.
What an interesting way to describe rehab, to get people back on side.
Yeah.
So it almost is like, it's almost like you're talking about it like, I haven't got a problem, like, but these people have, so I'm going to go to rehab to sort their problem with me out. Do you know what I'm saying?
That's exactly was my thought pattern.
Really?
You know, I was like, these people seem to think this is a problem, so I'm going to go and show them that it's not. You know, by kind of going, what's the most ultimate way of doing that? Well, I'll go to rehab and show them I'm fine. You know, and I went there and I came out. I went there for 2 weeks, I think, the first time, and I came out and I drank the next day.
Because then you can't be truthful in rehab because you don't even feel you should be in rehab.
I was just counting down the days till I could leave. You know, I'd give them 14 days because we had to do a single promo. And so I had to start promo on this date. So I've got 14 days, right? Okay, you got me for 14 days. And I literally just counted down the days. And 6 of them were on a detox to come off booze, you know. And then once I was in therapy and stuff, I just kind of stayed still, waited, counted down my time and left. You know. And the second time I did exactly the same thing, but for the people I was working with and for Emma, because she was really worried about me and kind of, I knew I was in big trouble. So I kind of went there to kind of go, right, I'll take it seriously this time, you know, but I really wasn't. I just wanted to do what I wanted to do and kind of like get people off my back a bit.
And what was your relationship like with yourself? Because I'm like, a theme I'm hearing from a lot of your answers, Matt, is that you didn't value yourself much. So Busted was a success in spite of you. Yeah. You know, your solo album flopped because you didn't try. It was almost like you didn't put your whole self out there, so you could find an excuse or mitigation if things didn't. So if it came off, there was a reason. If it didn't come off, there was a reason.
Yeah.
What's your relationship like with yourself, your own self-worth?
I think that was the biggest problem with me, you know, was you know, like I remember doing a TV presenting gig, you know, and I was kind of like, everything was going badly, and they were like, right, okay, we got you a presenting gig on this music thing. And I was like, well, how do I do that? How do I present? They were like, oh, just be yourself. I remember them telling me that. I was like, well, I fucking hate myself. I don't want to be that guy, you know. So it kind of, I always had this, you know, overwhelming kind of self-hatred that kind of followed me around. And I kind of, so I put on these different masks of people that I think people would like, you know, like Matt from Busted was a fucking great one, you know, like his people liked him, people invited him to places, you know, and that kind of stuff, until they didn't, until I became a liability, you know. But it was that self-worth thing was a really hard one for me to kind of come to terms with. It's still a struggle sometimes now, but I kind of have ways of kind of, you know, like, is that a fact or is that a thought? Those kind of things come into play all the time.
Cool, give us an example, because I think there's people listening to this that will be able to recognise some of those.
Yeah, like I always kind of think, you know, when something is about to happen or going to happen, be it good, bad, or otherwise, there's always a thought that creeps into my head that you're not good enough, you're not worthy enough, you're a fraud, all this kind of stuff, and then I have to really control that thought pattern and not let it escalate. So I kind of always have this thing, is that a thought or is that a fact, you know? And then I can kind of go, right, okay, what is that? Where's it coming from? Because it's always a thought. It's, you know, I mean, if someone asked me to run a marathon tomorrow, I'd say that's a valid thing for me to worry about, because I don't know what to do there and I've never done it before, you know. But most of these things in my life I've kind of done, and I kind of can prove that I can, you know. But I have this ability to put a wall in front of myself before it's begun with self-loathing, you know. So I have loads of practices I do daily. Like, I start my day with a gratitude journal, which I learned in rehab the last time I went to rehab, and it's been, I mean, I've passed this on to so many people I know, especially in recovery, because it's the biggest thing in my day. Like, it kind of starts my day with, you know, it seems really naff and cliche, but it's like, I can wake up on the wrong side of the bed every day if I want to, you know, and it kind of, so by waking up and starting about 3 simple things that I'm grateful for, it changes my thought pattern. You know, I can see that I'm grateful for them because I deserve them, you know, and that's a very different way to think about them, rather than I'm grateful for them because I'm chancing my way through it, you know, and so that's the way I think of it. I don't think of them, I think of ways that I'm worthy of those things that I'm grateful for, you know. And
I'm interested, I'll give you a personal example. I remember when I became a dad, what really left me feeling bereft once was somebody had said to me that I was pushing myself to the edge of burnout, and somebody had asked me to almost articulate that in a voice. And what had left me bereft was somebody had said to me, how would you feel if somebody spoke to your son in the way that you're speaking to yourself? And I was so horrified that I thought, I need to do something to correct this.
Yeah.
And I'm interested, for somebody that had this self-loathing, this destructive tendency, this propensity to addiction, when you became a father, what sort of emotions, questions and challenges did that stir up for you?
Well, that was the changing moment in my life, you know, because I can't really, like I said, I never meant to be in a band. I never meant to go to drama school and be an actor or anything. But I kind of, I always wanted to be a dad. You know, when I think back to everything in my life, the only thing I ever wanted to be was a father. I had the image of them in my head. I kind of could imagine myself being a dad. I knew what I wasn't going to do, you know, a very strong opinion on what I wasn't going to do and what kind of father I was going to be. And I had my daughter, and she was about 8 months, and I missed her crawling for the first time and my wife's birthday party because I was out getting fucked. And the next day I kind of, I woke up and Emma came in. She didn't shout at me. She didn't yell at me. She just told me what I'd missed and that she wasn't going to stand for it. And it hit me all of a sudden that I was going to be a terrible father. And it was the one thing that I had always planned not to be, the only thing I'd ever planned not to be. And I was going to do that. And I was going to do that to this little person who I loved more than I'd ever felt in my entire life. And I was going to repeat that cycle of shit, you know, and it made me drop to my knees and ask for help, you know, for the first time ever, like, and mean it, you know, like, I was always kind of mitigating damage, you know, I was always kind of trying to keep all these fucking plates in the air, you know, like, but at this point I was like, I have nothing that I can do, you know, because everything I do is not working. I need help. And it was, and it really, and I asked for help and I was given it. And that was the real turning point in my life with addiction, really. It kind of, you know, people say about rock bottoms, like, which I hear quite a lot in recovery, which is a terrifying prospect because I don't really like that term, because you hear, oh, he just hasn't hit his rock bottom yet. I'm like, people die in rock bottoms all the time, you know, and it's, and do we have to wait till it's one that society deems a success? You know, what does that mean? You know, whereas this night that I had was no different to thousands of nights that I'd had. But the prospect of what I would lose and what I would pass on to my child was too much for me to comprehend. So I think that was the moment when it gave me something bigger than myself, you know, which I think is the biggest thing. They say, they call it in recovery circles, they say a higher power. I don't know what that means, you know, but I know that I had something that was larger than myself to care for, you know, and that was what really turned the corner for me.
Wow, I mean, it's hugely moving to hear you talk about it like that. And then you go into rehab after that then?
No, I'd been to rehab before that. We'd been married. I went to rehab and I stayed sober for a while. I was sober on my wedding day, and then it was about 5 months after that, I started bouncing in and out, like relapsing here and there, but never intending to keep drinking. It was never like, I didn't want to, I was just doing it. And I think there's something that comes with knowledge as well. When you know what you're doing, you know, and you know you're acting this way, there's no hiding from yourself, which just feeds into shame, because I know exactly what I was doing and I was still doing it. And I think that was, but I'd learned so much in that rehab about me, and I really thrown myself at it. Like, before we got married, I was really in a really bad way. And so I went to rehab. I came out of rehab 3 days before my wedding day. And I was sober on my wedding day, which is amazing. And I had a honeymoon, and I had a period of time where everyone seemed to be, you know, happy with me, you know, and then I just started to fuck up again. And I think, but then when I had Isabel, I don't know, it became so much more shameful, like more than I'd ever felt before, because it was like, I could no longer rationalize it. I could no longer deny it away. It was just me acting addictively and punishing people around me by my behavior. So I think that was but then no, I stopped that day, and I kind of
so you stopped then without rehab. This is
without rehab. Yeah. I kind of but I think rehab, like addiction is a chronically relapsing thing. You know, like it doesn't have to be. You know, there's lots of people that I know that have got clean and stay clean. You know, but there is a large proportion of people that relapse quite often. And I think for me that was the case in the early days. Like I couldn't quite manage life without something else. You know, and I kind of would last a while and like grip onto my chair, you know, and kind of just get through life, and then I just wait until I could, you know, and I think, but that moment, I think, gave me something that they talk about, you know, that's kind of like, there's something that's larger than yourself, something more, something higher powerly, you know. Yeah. For me, it was my daughter, you know, and it kind of, and then it was about, and then I did everything I was told, you know, and I found other ways to keep my, you know, kind of addictions at bay, you know, and not even at bay, just to kind of just dismiss them and kind of focus on being a better person every day.
And how long ago was that?
That was
you've now got 3 kids,
12, right? 13 years ago. That was 13 years ago. But I relapsed about 6 years ago, which was which kind of came out of the blue, really. It was I was away with a band, and I've been clean for 8 years, hadn't done anything. And but I wasn't really, I was kind of in a place in my life where I felt like I was all right, you know. And then I was on tour, and someone we were hanging around with was doing gear in my dressing room, and they offered me a note, and I just went whoomp. And but I was like, to be honest, I was all. It's funny because relapses don't happen by accident. You know, I've been planning something like this for a while. I've been kind of knowing that I wasn't, I don't know, part of the party. You know, I was very much on my own all the time, and and it was a way to keep myself safe.
So where had the guy gone who was on his knees in the bedroom with an 8-month-old saying this never happens again? Like, what had happened to that Matt at this point?
I think he thought he was over it.
Right.
You know, I think I had thought at that point that I'd done enough.
It's so devious, isn't it? Addiction is so devious. It's almost like it's going to, you know what? You've done 8 years.
Yeah.
6 years. So I reckon you could have a drink now.
Yeah.
You're fine. You're no longer an addict.
The way I rationalised it was very similar, because I was like, well, alcohol was my downfall. I just did coke to keep me sober.
So you just thought, I'll take some coke.
So I'll just do cocaine. That's all right. You know, that's perfectly acceptable. That's fine. You know, so I didn't drink the entire time during my relapse, and that was what allowed me to kind of rationalise using. You know, but I wasn't using coke like anybody else does. You know, I was doing it. I was using coke alcoholically, you know, like I was doing it all day long, every day, you know. And it was and that lasted about 4 months, you know, until I kind of there was nowhere else for me to hide, and I kind of got on my knees again to my wife and told her everything, and kind of then I went and got help immediately.
I think we should probably talk about your wife then, and her pivotal role in this whole story.
Yeah.
You said earlier on in the interview, you said, I just always wore different masks. Like I wore Matt from Busted mask, which was like the fun time guy. Or
yeah.
When you first met Emma, like, were you wearing a mask then? And if so, how long did you wear the mask for before she sort of really got to know you?
I mean, at the beginning, I was wearing the Matt from Busted mask because people liked that guy, you know, and I mean, she was like, it's weird to talk about my wife this way, but like, I was so amazed that she was even dating me. Like really, like I was fucking like, she was in my phone as the fit girl from MTV, you know, like she was like, I couldn't believe that she was texting me back at the beginning, you know, and kind of like these kind of things. And like, let alone that I was with her, you know, so I mean that lasted a while.
Yeah, well, of course it did, because you're the guy full of shame. So
yeah,
you're not meant to be loved or have people show you affection.
Exactly,
you don't feel
especially not
it.
this like woman who I worshipped. You know, like I couldn't believe that she was with me.
Yeah.
You know, and like, and but you know, over time those things we come to know the real you, and I'm not sure whether that was a good thing or a bad thing for her. But from she was everything I wasn't. You know, like I couldn't believe that she was like she was. I'd never met anybody like her.
What do you mean by that? She was everything you wasn't?
Well, she was what I suppose people would call normal. You know, like she was, you know, as incredible as she is, you know, like her family were like this amazing unit, and I remember going around to her house once, and I'd been out with her the night before, and we'd stayed at her parents' house, and we woke up. And then there was no plan the next day. There was nothing to do. They just hung out with each other in the living room all day, and that's what they wanted to do. I was like, wait, so you just want to spend time with each other? That's all you want to do, you know, drink tea and chat and spend time. I couldn't believe that people did this, you know, like it was so alien to me. And she was I don't know, there was no bullshit with her. There was not what you see is what you get, you know, like there was no pretense, there was no acting different in a certain situation. There was just her, and she'd just be this person and everywhere she went, and it was incredible to kind of see, you know.
And what was the effect on you of being in a stable family environment like that, people just wanting to speak to you, not to Matt from Busted? How did that make you feel?
It was quite hard at the beginning, if I'm honest. It was really weird for me to be in any kind of like, I used to hate social situations, but then I'd drink and everything would be all right, you know, like, but like to not be able to do that and to just be there and just be was really difficult for me, because I had to kind of turn it into some kind of performance, or, you know, or be the, I don't know, like whatever they wanted me to be, you know, and they didn't want me to be anything. You know, which was really, really hard for me to comprehend and understand. So I probably acted like an absolute dick for many years, you know, kind of like trying to be this thing that I think they'd like, you know, when actually they just liked me.
So people know Emma as a TV presenter. Tell us what she's like as a wife and as a mum.
She's the most like selfless, like loving person I've ever met in my life. Like, and I can understand why she ended up with me in a way, because she's a fixer. You know, she sees something and she wants to fix it. You know, she's very caring. You know, like people say they're very caring, but Emma it's in her DNA. You know, like it's something about her that wants to kind of care for people. And I think that was what she found quite hard with me, is that she didn't, in the end, she didn't know what else to do. You know, like so it was but she was fun, she was cool, she was, you know, just an amazing, incredible human that I couldn't believe that she was kind of hanging out with me.
So, as an addict, what advice would you give for people out there that might be listening to this, that maybe can see some of these patterns of behaviour? Maybe it's not manifesting itself in drink or drugs, but it might be other addictive behaviours like a work ethic or addiction to social media. It can be a myriad of other things.
Yeah.
What advice would you give for anybody out there that wants to help somebody that they see in the grip of an addiction?
I think this is the hardest question in the world, because, you know, I've always been told that you can't help anybody until they're ready to be helped. You know, and I do think there is something in that. I wish there wasn't, because I've tried. You know, like, I mean, I meet people all the time, and I get people passed on to me that people are worried about, and I talk to them, and there's a barrier that is until you're ready to accept the problem that you have, it's impossible to penetrate. You know, and even when you can penetrate it, there's always the risk of something else getting in the way. You know, so it's a really hard thing. I think, like I read this amazing book by Dr. Anna Lemke. She talks about dopamine and kind of like the imbalance in the body of dopamine. She always does something which I have started to do with people, because there's a difference between addiction and problem drinking, and there's a difference between problem using and addiction, you know. And I think there's a real test, which is a 30-day test, right? It's if you can stay out the way from your substance of choice, whatever that be it alcohol, be it drugs, be it sex, be it gambling, be it social media, whatever it is, for 30 days, you can reset some of those neuro pathways in your brain to connect with that that substance, so you can rewire those things, right? It takes 30 days, and you can readdress your relationship with that thing, right? So, and if after those 30 days life is better, you know, your relationships are better, you feel good about yourself, everything's good, then maybe you have to address the feeling of, do you want that back in your life, you know? And then you have to face the thing of, can you bring it back in your life, you know? And I'm not there to say anything, because like each their own. If they can, then fucking good on them. I wish I could. Actually, no, I don't actually wish I could. But I admire people that can, you know. But I definitely can't. But there is something about that which I tell a lot of people to do. I'm like, right, for the next 30 days, we're going to try it. And if you can't last that 30 days, maybe you have a problem, you know.
And what about healthy addictions, though? And what I mean by that is stuff that society goes, oh, that's brilliant that you've got such a strong work ethic, but it might be crossing into the boundary of some kind of addiction, or it might be somebody obsessed by a fitness goal or something like that that's pushing themselves. Like, what's your...
Well, I think it always comes down to why, you know, like, and that's the thing, like, if you feel like you have something going on like that, you have to maybe, I think for me, like, I've had that a lot in my life. Like, for me, drinking drugs don't come into my life every day, but behavior does, you know, and it's my behavior which worries me, and I can become addict-like about pretty much anything,
right?
You know, and I find myself getting like it quite often with things. And normally my wife's the first one to say, you need to pay attention to this. But a lot of the time I do pick it up myself. And it's always like, what am I trying to soothe?
What sort of things then?
Well, I mean, exercise was a big thing for me for a long time. Like, when I got clean, I kind of, I found exercise. And like, there's been times in my life when I've ate at the bleep of a watch from Tupperware and kind of trained for a bodybuilding competition that's never happening. You know, and I'm like, why am I doing this? You know, why am I becoming so obsessed with this thing?
Were you into CrossFit for a bit?
Yep.
I'm sure I was at an event once and you were there. You looked massive.
Yeah.
And I was like, what's going on your arm? Just CrossFit? Or like,
and
you were deep into CrossFit at that time.
Yeah. I mean, that's an addict's dream, CrossFit. But I think so. But it's also fantastic, you know, and there's a sense of community and sense of connection with people, and you're all in it for the same reasons. And there's a beautiful part of CrossFit. I think it's an incredible thing. It's not for me, because I've learned that I can take that. I'm competing for the CrossFit Games when I'm really not, you know, so it's, I had to be, you know, same with cycling for me, that became a problem, you know, all these kind of things. And food is a real issue for me at times, you know, but I think with anything, it comes down to what are you trying to dull, you know, what are you trying to, you know, what are you using this for, you know, and I have to ask myself those questions quite a lot, you know, why am I doing this? Is it coming from you know, and sometimes they're all right. You know, that's the thing. Like, sometimes, like, working out most days is okay. It's good for your health. It kind of keeps you longevity. All these kind of things are fantastic for. But if I'm doing it as a form of punishment, which can happen sometimes, or if I'm doing it as a form of just getting away from everything else, that can be a problem for me. But you know, I think society, we we don't look at these in the same way. You know, we celebrate these kind of things, like especially workaholics. We celebrate these people, you know. But if you look at these people who are, you know, the most powerful people, like I'm sure, you know, I don't know the relationship that Jeff Bezos has with his family, but I'm sure they miss him sometimes. You know, like you know, there's got to be so much that you give up, you know, to be that kind of workaholic, you know. So and for me, I have to really address those things.
So would you tell us some of the key questions that you have learned to ask yourself when you think that you might be going down that path, whether it's a destructive or even what might be regarded as socially acceptable addiction? What are the kind of questions you ask yourself that give you a pause for thought and stop it spiraling?
I think for me, it always comes down to what's going on in my life right now. Like, am I living the way that I want to, you know, with these certain aspects of my life, which can be purpose, you know, which is a hard one for me, you know, but family is the big part of that for me. Like, am I fulfilling these parts of my family life, which I should be? And when I'm not, it's usually because something else is creeping in the way and kind of getting in the way of that. You know, am I doing everything I can for what I love? You know, and that can be work sometimes, you know, but like I think for me, I have a real funny relationship with that, because sometimes you need to put everything you have into something, you know, and especially with the band, there's times in my life when I have to put everything I have into this entity with my life, and things can fall away. But I think there's, you know, like I read about these, I listened to these people talk about how this couple would have a quarterly, they'd sit down, they'd mark each other out of 10 on these different aspects of their life, whether like it be provider, lover, you know, parent, all these kind of things, and they'd mark each other out of 10. As long as they're getting 30, then they're doing okay, you know. But
Have
like,
you adopted that at home?
No, that would not go down very well in my house. but they mark each other on it, you know. Like, so they're exactly brave couple, right? But I think that's the thing. Like, I have these different things, and sometimes one of them can fall away a little bit, as long as the others are okay, and as long as I pay attention to that one, I can go back to it and build it back up, you know. But I do have problems with that, you know, about finding balance. I don't know what that work-life balance is. I don't really understand that yet, you know, so I'm still kind of coming to terms with that.
What about marriage? Because, you know, remaining married is enough of a challenge for most people.
Yeah.
Remaining married to an addict when you have 3 kids and your wife has a high-profile life with demands on her own time and other things, like that's a real challenge. So you clearly have a high-performance marriage.
Yeah.
What are the secrets?
I think it's brutal honesty.
Yeah.
You know, but that comes up in every part of my life now, which is something which I fought against so hard in early recovery. Kind of like, I lied about everything. I never told the truth once to anybody at any moment, really. You know, like I didn't really ever tell what was really going on for me at any moment. You know, now I have to be brutally honest about everything, unless it will cause the other person incredible harm. I am really honest about things, and I think me and Emma have that. We're able to go, hey, this is not cool, or this is affecting me, or you need to look at this, you know. I think that's and we're not scared of those things either, like, because I will always, you know, sometimes my reaction's not great because I don't want something to be taken away which I'm enjoying, you know, or those kind of things, you know. And it's not about taking things away, it's about looking at something in a different way, you know. But I think having that kind of open dialogue is a big thing, you know, and being able to talk about stuff. We've got history that proves that I don't do very well with secrets, you know, like they can eat away at me. And I think, and what I've learned from everybody I've met in recovery is you never really get away with anything. Really. You never really, you think maybe you've got away with that from a few years ago. You haven't. You know, it will either come back to you in a few years, or it will eat the fuck away at you for so long that it will cause something that will erupt into something else. So really kind of being as honest as possible is the most safest way.
Is that one of the worst things, the deceit and the lying and the double crossing and the trickery that comes with the addiction?
Yeah, I think for me, I didn't really realize how exhausting that was. You know, like I hear like some people will say to me, I can't believe you don't have a drink anymore. Isn't that really hard? I'm like, not as hard as it was drinking. You know, that was really fucking difficult, like lying and cheating and working my way out and remembering what lies I'd told. And, you know, that was the worst thing for me, is kind of remembering all the, you know, it was so exhausting that life is really fucking hard. This life is pretty simple as long as I treat it simple. They say, you know, they say kiss, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah. And do you have ground rules now that you and Emma work to, like, I don't know whether you regularly think that thought comes in your head, oh, I'm going to have a drink or I'm going to take some drugs. I don't know whether that is a thought that comes in and gets pushed away, or whether you don't have those thoughts at all, or if they do you have a rule that you tell her, or that if you're feeling a certain way, you make sure you mention it to her, or if she's scared about you, she definitely speaks to you about it? Do you have these?
She speaks to me about it. You know, she brings up something. If she's worried or she thinks I'm not telling the truth about something, she'll bring it up with me all the time. I have other people who I talk to about those things. You know, like I don't want to burden her with every, you know, crazy addiction thought that I have. You know, I don't think about taking drugs and drinking daily. You know, like occasionally, like I'll walk past a pub in the summer and I'll see someone drinking a pint with a condensation coming down the glass, and it'll make me go, you know. Yeah. But I have this thing which I do, which is I fast forward the tape, you know, and I say that drink, if I fast forward in 4 hours, I'm in a hotel room on my own taking drugs and hiding from everybody. You know, it happens every time, and there's not a single time that's ever been one. You know, never. You know, so I know what that is, and I can fast forward the tape.
Brilliant.
And in your explorations on this topic of trying to understand addiction, where have you got to in understanding how much of it is nature and how much of it would you regard as nurture? And I'm thinking especially in relation to your own children.
Yeah, I mean that's something which I was fascinated by, and like I think there's a guy, if anyone hasn't checked him out, this guy called Dr. Gabor Mate. If you're in the kind of world of addiction, or you kind of have any kind of questions about that, he's a really good resource, and he can articulate things in a way that I can't, you know. But he's been a real eye opener for me, you know. And I don't agree with everything he says, but a lot of it I do, and I see myself in it, you know. I think, you know, and the thing is, I think trauma, they call it like a big T and a little t. There's big traumas and there's little traumas, you know, but trauma can be something that happened to you, or it can be something that didn't happen enough, you know, which is another thing which I hear, you know, because I've met lots of people in my life who say, especially addicts, who say, well, I had the most perfect childhood and I grew up in a loving, warm home, you know, and like I come from money and all this kind of stuff. It doesn't make sense that it's like that to me. And that's when those kind of things come into play, because it doesn't have to be something that happened to you. It can be something that you didn't experience, or can be something that didn't happen to you enough. And it's through no fault of anybody else. This is not, and that's a big thing for me as well, is that I spent a lot of my life blaming people for the way I behaved. And that allowed me to drink and use, because that kind of like, well, if you've been through what I've been through, you do the same, you know. Yep. Well, there's lots of people who don't, you know, but I think the biggest thing, right, is everything comes from action. You know, like when it comes to anything to do with this kind of stuff, everything comes from action, because you're not responsible for what happened to you. You know, you're not responsible for what happened to you, but you're absolutely responsible for what you do next, you know, and that is about, you know, making the choices in the moment that allow you to be the person you want to be, rather than the person that's sucked into that past, you know.
And before we move on to our quickfire questions to finish this interview, you talked about total honesty. So we're sitting here having this conversation, and you are weeks away from being back with the band and from touring again, and the last time that you had a relapse that happened. So what part does fear play in the life of a recovering addict?
I think fear of relapse for me is huge. You know, I live with that, but I don't, when I've not had that, I've relapsed, you know, like, so I don't want to let go of that, you know, which is not always helpful. I can imagine for a lot of people listening, that doesn't sound like a healthy way to live. But for me, the fear of relapsing is so terrifying that I like that bit of fear, because it keeps me it keeps me from picking up, you know, and it keeps me from putting myself in really ridiculous situations which I shouldn't be, you know, and that's about, and a lot of my life in the band is about mitigating that in a way. You know, I'm really open and honest with them, and and I tell them what I'm able to accept and what I'm not. Yeah. You know, like we have a no drugs rule, you know, in the band, and our crew now and everyone that works with us, that we don't have drugs around us. You know, like I don't mind people drinking. It doesn't bother me people drinking, but if people are doing coke in front of me, it really affects me. You know, and it's not because I want to do it. It just makes me uneasy. You know, so I don't ever want to feel that anymore. So I'm like, if I can, I don't have to be in that situation. So if everyone can be on board with me, then that's great. And lucky my band are cool as hell with that. And everyone we work with now is kind of picked and chosen because of that. You know, so that's a good way for me to live.
Great. And I think that reframing of fear from being a negative emotion to being a positive one for you, and almost like it's like your seatbelt. It keeps you safe, that fear. And I think it's okay. Why should society decide that that's a negative emotion? It might be for others, but it isn't for you, and that's cool. It isn't
for me. But I think I've always been driven by a bit of fear. You know, like everything I've done has always been driven by, in some way, fear. You know, like but now I'm much better at leaning into it. You know, like I run towards things that scare me now, which is something which I never thought I would do. I always run away from them. But if something's challenging or difficult, I find myself navigating towards it these days.
I wonder why that is.
Exactly. Maybe it's a little bit of an addictive tendency, but it's I find that, you know, like if you get something good from hard work, you know, the goods tends to stay around a bit more, you know, and the hard work is temporary.
I just think, you know, this conversation is like an ultimate conversation about high performance. You know, we try and say this to so many people. We know if people don't listen to this podcast, Matt, because they walk past us in the street and go, "Oh, I'm not listening to successful people blow smoke up the arse of other successful people about how easy their life has been." And we're like, you've clearly never listened.
You've never listened to this podcast, yeah.
You know, what you're describing here, this is high performance. You know, being in a successful band, despite the shame and the self-loathing, managing to become a brilliant dad, despite the fact that you have this constant ghost and this shadow of potential addiction, managing to be in a successful marriage when you've been on your knees crying in front of your wife, asking her to help you. You know, the ability to sit here and talk about it in the way that you can now with utter honesty. Like, high performance is not gliding through life thinking this is sweet. High performance is being dealt just scoop after scoop after scoop of crap.
Yeah.
And look at you being able to sit here now. And of course, you might never feel that real sense of freedom that perhaps you deserve for all your hard work.
Yeah.
But to have achieved what you have, I think is incredible. Like,
no, thanks, man. Thanks, dude.
Ultimate high performance.
Jocko says that discipline equals freedom. I really believe that. You know, I believe there's a freedom in that. As long as I keep myself disciplined and I work a certain way, I can live a life that I love.
I love that.
And if there was, sorry, I know that's a really appropriate place to finish this, but I think the metaphor that really jumps out at me is you've described for many years you were putting on masks, and I sensed as you sat here in front of us that you're almost, this is nakedly you. There's no mask. You're not hiding behind anything. And I'm interested in there'll be a lot of people listening to this that want that similar liberation of I just want to be me and be accepted for it. Is there one message you would give to anybody that got that kind of longing about how you've done it?
I think it's I think I've always known who I was, but I was terrified to show people because I didn't think it was enough. You know, I didn't think that was acceptable enough, that was cool enough, that was good enough. But when I gave that shit up, when I went, do you know what? I'm a mess, and I need to be, but I want to be better, you know. And that moment changed something in me that made me, that was only positive, you know. And from then on, there is no more mask, because you accept who you are in the basis, in the most basic raw form, you know. And it's okay to be a mess, right? It's a lot of people are, a lot of the time, and I go through stages of being like that now, like I don't drink and use, but sometimes I can get really all over the place, but I have a way of kind of dealing with that now. And I think for me, being honest and being open and actually not trying to be something else is the biggest thing. And sometimes people don't, like for me, I didn't know who that was. I was like, without these masks, without this kind of like this act that I put on, who the fuck am I? But as soon as I put these masks down, you kind of realize who you are and you can build on that. But you can't build a mask on a mask on a mask.
Amazing. Right. Quick 5 questions, Matt.
All right.
The 3 non-negotiable behaviours that you and the people around you would ideally buy into.
1, sobriety. My number 1. Everything else falls apart without it. 2, gratitude journal. I have to do that every day. And 3, supplementation.
Go on, give us your quick 30 seconds on supplementation.
I mean, I have had to narrow it down. At one point, I was taking like 76 different supplements, so I really went a bit addictive over it. But most of them have been taken up by athletic greens these days.
I am obsessed with it.
It's a game changer.
Don't you think it works though?
Dude, I've never felt better in my life.
I've never been ill.
Like,
my nails are crazy.
Mate, everything about me. I mean, I feel like this is an ad. But honestly, like I used to buy it from the States. I used to have it shipped over. It cost me 70 quid in shipping every time. But now it's available in the UK. It's brilliant. But I take that every day. And I have a few things like vitamin D and kind of
CBD.
I don't do CBD. No. I mean, I know it's not habit forming or anything, but I've not really ever seen any kind of. I have in the past, but I haven't really seen
this Whoop band, right?
Yeah.
And maybe CBD is not the right thing for you because of your path.
It's not habit forming. No THC.
It's the number 1 thing that has rocketed my HRV on my
Really?
So when I first started wearing a Whoop band, I wasn't taking athletic greens or any supplements or CBD, right?
Yeah.
My HRV on a good day was about 38.
Right.
Now it's about 80.
Really?
Yeah.
Holy shit. That's massive. Oh my God, that's amazing.
Is it unbelievable?
That's really good. And what, you take that at night time? Or during the day?
See, I do like Trip, have like a drip that goes under your tongue. And they say take a couple of drops, but I do like a vial like that. Quite strong stuff. And it honestly...
Whatever they're saying, the thing, take double.
Exactly. But I think...
Don't listen to me about anything to do with that.
This is an interesting conversation about finding your... Like, again, it's about exploration. Like Johnny Wilkinson came on this podcast and we said, what is high performance? He said, it's exploration. And I think
good point.
Exploring safe stuff.
Like
supplementation or gratitude journals, or like that, exploring that stuff is really quite powerful.
Absolutely. And food's part of that for me. Food's part of supplementation. Like not eating terrible stuff and feeling good about myself is great. But I mean, I've narrowed it down. I now take about 16 different things. I take a lot of things for brain health as well because I kind of feel like I've done a lot of damage to my brain cells in my life. So I kind of take a lot of stuff to kind of
mitigate that. Do you feel that you're cloudy in the head?
I have done for many years in my life. I felt really foggy, and but I don't feel that bad now these days because I take lots of things which kind of help me. Yeah.
What's your biggest strength and your greatest weakness?
My biggest strength is passion. I can become really passionate about something, my passion alone sometimes can drive something forward. My biggest weakness is passion. I can be so passionate about something, I can forget to see anything else but that. So it's a gift and a curse. It annoys the shit out of people.
We have a high performance book club. We've got thousands of members. People love discussing the latest things they've read. If you could add a book to our book club, what would it be and why?
It'd be The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. It's one of the best books I've ever read. Like literally, I read that book in a day, and it was like it was talking to me. And I've learned more from that book. I've read it about 7 times. It's in my bag right now. I'm reading it right now.
Really?
Like I keep going back to it.
Why is it so powerful?
Well, it talks about resistance, and I never thought of it. I thought of that as that part of me that hated myself, and maybe it is, but it's actually, and that's about running towards things that scare you, because normally the things that scare me are things that I want, but I'm too scared to go for it because I can get in my own way, and I think just the subject, especially but it doesn't have to be about art in a kind of like in a music or a painting kind of way. It can be about anything, any goal that you want. Like there can be something that stops you from doing it. And that thing is innate in every human being, and everyone deals with it. And it's about knowing what that is and knowing that that's just there and it's never going to go away, but you have to beat it every day. And that's what I try to do.
What advice would you give to a teenage Matt just starting out?
I had this amazing moment where I did a breathwork class, which I didn't see coming. And I just did this like kind of like really deep breathing class. And this voice that kept going in my head was, "It's not your fault." And it kind of kept going into my brain, and something changed in me during that class. And I don't think it's anything like spiritual or something. I think it was about me accepting that, you know, and going, it isn't your fault, but you are responsible for what you do next. And that was a real dawning moment on me. So I think I just tell him a bit bloody earlier.
Yeah. Do you believe it now?
I do. I really do. You know, I believe everything's about action.
Great. We talk often on this podcast, fault versus responsibility. People mistake them. Fault. Like, none of this is your fault.
Yeah.
But the hard truth is it's all your responsibility.
Absolutely.
It's no one else's.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Is legacy important to you?
I think legacy is a weird word. You know, like, I think, you know, for me, my kids are, I suppose, my legacy.
Yeah.
You know, I've always been, you know, really worried about anything that I've done in the past that would kind of hurt them, you know, and I'm still worried about that. You know, they weren't around during my really dark times, and I was away during my last relapse. I wasn't at home. And so but they were still around during that time, you know, so I do think about how much that will impact them. But I try to do everything I can to let them know that I'm who I am right now. But they're fucking awesome. They're wicked kids.
Nice.
If you could go back to one moment in time, what would it be and why?
If I could go back to one moment in time, I do regret the Brit Awards. We won 2 Brits in 2004, and I left as soon as it was finished and went to a flat and used drugs with strangers for 7 hours. And my band had this incredible night, you know, and like had this, and there was pictures of them in a kebab shop with their Brit Awards in their hand, and I wasn't there. I've always regretted that, you know, because, you know, if I could, I'd say stick around, you know.
And the final question after this amazing conversation for people that have listened to this is, what would you now say is your one golden rule? The sort of final thing you'd like to leave ringing in people's ears, your secret, I guess, to high performance?
My one golden rule, I suppose it's step up. You know, like I was very easy to wallow, you know, and I'm not okay with that anymore. I step into things, you know, I kind of try really hard to step up, you know, and good things happen when you do. Sometimes you fail, but that's all right, you know, as long as you kind of step up to the next thing.
It's brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey guys, it's Jake here. Listen, before you go, please do me just one favour. Hit subscribe. It makes such a difference to us. The more subscribers we get, then the bigger the channel becomes. The bigger the channel becomes, the bigger the names we can attract and the more impact we can have for you. So thanks for watching, and please subscribe right now.